These are hard to talk about. And in all of the shootings that we have just mentioned, the shooters were children. So why are so many of them getting their hands on guns, and what can we do to stop it? Helping us unpack this issue, firearms expert and the executive vice president of the Second Amendment organization, Rob Pincus. Rob, thanks for being with us. You've been an outspoken supporter of the Second Amendment, no doubt, and at the same time called for action to stop gun violence. So what happens for you when you hear headlines like the ones we just laid out?
These things are tragedies, and they are, in most cases, tragedies that something can be done about. Now, we don't have a lot of the details. For example, in the murders in Washington, we know that that was a domestic incident. Apparently, it was the oldest teenage son. But when we look at something like the unsecured loaded firearm left in a trunk, a long gun, a lot of people are aware, that personal responsibility when it comes to gun ownership is the number one thing we have to worry about is unauthorized access to those firearms. Now, if I'm wearing a firearm, I'm controlling access to it. The minute that firearm comes off of my body, or when I have firearms, for example, that are stored in my home, as a gun owner, that's my number one responsibility. Second Amendment organization and many, many other organizations inside of the gun community preach responsible firearms ownership using lock boxes, using locking devices. And the fact is that if someone has a firearm and they're allowing unauthorized, unsupervised access by children, they're being reckless, they're being negligent. And as we've seen recently, parents are being held accountable. Now, the charges that were mentioned in the lead-in there, felon in possession of a firearm, that's a different issue from the negligence of allowing children to have access to a firearm. And we have seen parents recently in Michigan convicted of that type of negligence without any special laws. I think that's important to remember. Is we don't need special laws. We need better parenting and responsible gun ownership.
And so, Rob, you wrote an op-ed a few years ago that got you into some hot water with some Second Amendment advocates. And in it, you addressed gun violence and death, saying, quote, "Together, we can cut the number of gun-involved deaths in our country in half and make us all safer, make all of us safer, just by keeping guns from the people we all agree should not have them, i.e. people who are a danger to themselves or others." And I will also go out on a limb and think you also mean children who should not have guns. So what do you say to people who got mad about that statement?
Well, that was a team article. It was a co-written article that took two very different backgrounds, two very different perspectives. Someone who has been involved in the gun control side of the argument for over 20 years, and myself, who've been involved in the gun rights and the gun responsibility movement for over 20 years. And there are things we agree on. There is such a thing as common ground. Now, you say, I don't want to jump right in and say, absolutely, kids shouldn't have access to guns. When I was a child, I had access to guns, but I also had a lot of training, a lot of experience, and what I would say would be supervision at a distance. Now, I have two daughters. One's 9 and one's 29. The 29-year-old did not have direct access to guns, immediate access to guns, but she probably would have had an easier time getting her hands on firearms than my 9-year-old would in the home. And that's an evolution that I've had as a parent. I think it's an evolution that the firearms community has had as a whole. I think we're much better about understanding that, especially teenagers. There's a potential behavioral issue. There are issues with pushing boundaries. There's issues with not understanding consequences of actions that do put, I think, most teenagers absolutely in the category of people we don't want to have access to firearms. There are going to be individual parents who feel that the way they've raised their kids and the responsibility their kids have demonstrated means that their kids can have access to firearms inside the home. What I look for is that better solution, which is something like a code-controlled lockbox, something like this, where there's a code as well as a fingerprint that prevents unauthorized access to this. If my daughter, who again is now 29, has a concealed carry permit, has a daughter of her own, my granddaughter, when she was 16, I would absolutely have trusted her to be locked inside the house, call me on the phone and say, someone's trying to break in. Dad, I need the code to the defensive gun. And she would have known how to use it. But she was also in defensive shooting competitions when she was 10 years old. So I think we have to remember all families have unique situations, but what there is no excuse for is not having something like this simple locking device preventing unauthorized or impulsive use of this firearm without removing the lock. And because these things are so readily available, because every new firearm that's sold in this country comes with a locking device, because they're more reliable and more affordable, the ones that have higher technology every day, I do think that every firearms owner should be meeting their responsibility to prevent unauthorized access from children or other people that, again, as you noted from that article, have demonstrated that they prevent a danger to themselves or others. What we can't be doing is restricting individuals' rights when they have not demonstrated, as adults, they've not demonstrated any proclivity towards hurting themselves or others. And that's where we get into the rub of what is gun control and what is responsible gun ownership.
And I should have been clear there. I didn't mean to say kids. I should have said toddlers. Toddlers should probably not have guns.
Oh, absolutely.
But bottom line here,
100%.
access is an issue, especially with kids. We have 30 seconds left. What can gun owners do tonight to audit their own home, do their part to prevent guns from getting into the wrong hands, like into toddlers' hands?
If you can't run out and get a device right now, but what you could do is put those firearms in a locked bedroom. A spare bedroom or a spare closet with a deadbolt is a great way to secure all the guns in the house. If they're being staged for defensive use, you need a quick access lock. You can learn more about those at personaldefensenetwork.com or, as always, 2AO.org.
Okay, firearms expert, teacher, and author Rob Pincus, thank you so much for joining us tonight.
Thank you.